The Queen's Gambit is one of the most popular openings in the whole world. It's so popular that they made a whole movie about it. Super Grandmasters still play this opening to this day. Even World Championship matches have been decided on who knows this opening better than the opponent. So let's start learning, and I'm gonna make this as simple as possible for any beginner to start playing the Queen's Gambit today. The Queen's Gambit starts off like this. D4, D5, C4 is what initiates the Queen's Gambit because you're sacrificing the C pawn, temporarily of course, for some type of initiative. Now, what is a gambit? Well, a gambit is when you're sacrificing material to gain some type of advantage in a position. It could be a space advantage, it could be a pawn structure advantage, but usually it is a time advantage. And by time, I mean who has more development in the position. Now, if you're sacrificing material and you're not getting any advantage anywhere in the position, then that's just blundering. That's not gambiting a pawn. Don't try to sound smart. And so after the move C4, black has a lot of defenses here. What do I mean? Well, they can do the move C6, which initiates the Slav defense. They can do the move D takes on C4, which initiates the Queen's Gambit accepted. They can do the move Knight to C6, which initiates the Gregorian defense, which is a Queen's Gambit decline. And they could do the move E5 in this position, which is pretty much attacking white straight out the gate. Black does not want any draws in this position because they are playing the Alpin counter gambit. You're going to have to be prepared for all of this if you are playing the white pieces, because these four moves is played most of the time if you're playing the Queen's Gambit. Now, I digress. The main move that you're going to have to learn is E6. What to do after E6. And white could do a lot of things after E6. For example, we're going to be going over Knight to C3, but for instance, they could play Knight to F3 and get a primarily normal position after Knight to F3, Knight to F6, G3, which initiates the Catalan opening. That's my favorite opening. People in the comments would know I stream about this opening all the time, and you can actually catch those streams on my Twitch channel or on my YouTube channel. So we can immediately do the move G3 after E6, which isn't a Catalan per se. It can transpose it to a Catalan, but it's a different type of Queen's Gambit decline. We can immediately capture the pawn, which is a little bit boring. And we could do an immediate E3, which is passive, but very solid for the white pieces. After the move, Knight to C3 in this position, we have Knight to F6, and we're gonna be talking about C takes on D5, but I wanna show you some other lines that are just fine for the white pieces. And there are a lot of variations that you can play because this is a flexible type of opening. For example, you can do Bishop to G5, which goes into the Queen's Knight variation. And after Queen to G5, Bishop E7, E3, Castle Kingside, Knight to F3. This is just fine for both sides. Now, let's go back. Instead of doing Bishop to G5, you can play Bishop to F4. Sometimes people like the bishop on F4 to target this pawn on C7 or this diagonal, and maybe to eventually do the move Knight to B5, maybe get a fork off. Don't do it too early because we got to develop the rest of our pieces and castle the king. This is kind of more Jabava London style, but usually in a Jabava London, we don't push the C pawn. After the move Bishop to F4, Bishop E7, E3, Castle Kingside, Knight to F3. This is called the Three Knights Horowitz attack. Now, instead of doing the move Bishop to F4, I always got to show this move because this is playable. And most people would say, well, this is wrong because you got to get your bishop outside of the pawn chain. But you don't always have to. You can just do the move E3. And usually what you do with this bishop on C1 is fianchetto the bishop on the B2 square, doing moves like B3, Bishop B2, and etc. And so after Bishop E7, Knight to F3, Castle Kingside, Bishop D3, this is a very solid position for the white pieces. A little bit passive, but playable. And maybe you can get a quick E4 push in, get that pawn break in to control the center. Now, what happens after C takes on D5? And this is the most popular move that you could do in the Queen's Gambit. This has been battled for years. You're not the first person to play this. But since you're not the first person to play this, you can learn from past grandmasters on how to strategize in these type of positions. After C takes on d5, E takes on d5, bishop g5, c6, solidifying that pawn on d5, and make sure that that knight doesn't go to b5. e3, bishop e7, bishop d3, putting this bishop along this diagonal. Maybe we got some sacrifices going on here, maybe doing moves like bishop c2, queen d3, etc. But tricks is for kids, so don't always go for tricks in chess. Sometimes it doesn't work. Knight b to d7, queen c2, castle kingside, knight g to e2, rook e8. And this is a Carlspawn type of structure that white has here. Very, very close, especially after castle kingside. All they got to do is just push up that f3 pawn and we're made, because white has two different decisions here in this variation. They can attack in the center, which is a little bit more risky because that d pawn is a little bit sketchy on the d4 square. If you push up f3, e4, that queen will be eyeing that d pawn. But the more solid approach that most people take is actually doing a minority attack on the queen side. So for example, pushing up b4, b5, etc. Of course, you can't do it right now, and it's gonna have to take some preparation, like doing the move rook to b1, b4, b5, but they will try to stop you. It's a very strategic type of game, and it could be a lot of tactics if both players play sharp and precisely, and both players want a win in this type of position. I used to play these positions all the time for the black pieces. I don't anymore because I found better ones that suit my personality. And you're gonna have to do the same thing. You're gonna have to find openings that suit your personality, all right? So play right now, go to chess.com, do whatever you want, all right? Go play d4, d5, c4.